The first time I came across archetypes was actually through astrology. And I don't mean the one that you read in the newspaper, but the real thing. And yes, I will be covering what I mean with the real thing of astrology in another video, but for this one I want to focus on the archetypes. So when I came in touch with the archetypes, I didn't expect on what a big impact they would have in my life. At that time, I still felt very lost. I felt like I was struggling with my life, and I felt stuck and like I was constantly fighting myself, like there was something wrong with me. This is something that I felt in and outside the self-development field. So even when I talked to friends or family, I was trying to explain what was going on, and it always felt like the advice that they were giving me, even though well-intentioned, but it always made me feel like there's something wrong with me and needed to be fixed. But with the introduction of the archetypes, there all of a sudden was this feeling there's nothing wrong with you. There is just a very specific energy at play, and it's all about understanding that energy and to work with it. All of a sudden, my struggles started to feel dynamic instead of static, something that I could actually work through and things would become easier. So it was just about getting a new perspective that was actually empowering. Hello and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jada. By now you have probably already seen some of my archetypes video, and I wanted to take a moment to share my personal journey or experience with them. First, I want to share with you why I find the archetypes so powerful, and afterwards I'm going to share with you some personal examples. One is what I would describe as detachment. So by noticing an archetype, you're basically getting into observer mode. Instead of being totally consumed by that part of yourself, because an archetype is basically nothing else than a specific energy inside of you, you can detach yourself from the experience and look at it from an objective point of view. So once you detach yourself from the experience, you can start work with it. And this is what I would describe as a phase of realization or reflection. It's noticing that, okay, this is just something that I am experiencing and not something I am. If I will give you a personal example, I was struggling for the longest time in finding what I wanted to do with my life. And before being able to detach from that part, I always felt like something was wrong with me, like there was nothing that I was passionate about. There is no way of finding fulfillment when it came to career. But the moment that I realized, okay, there's this part of myself that longs for a fulfilling career, I could look at it more objectively. It didn't feel like there's nothing for me. It felt like I haven't found it. So it was basically just a shift in perspective. But that shift allowed me to start working with it. Because as long as I was attached to the experience, which would be I can't find my passion and what I wanted to do with my life, to being detached from it, which would be I haven't found it yet, I can start to work with it. So I hope you can notice the difference. As long as you are identified with the part of yourself, things are very static and there's not much room to grow from it. But as soon as you start to detach yourself from the experience, you get an objective point of view and you start to see things from different perspectives, which then allows you to work with it and take different actions. So once you have observed that part about yourself and you were able to detach yourself from the experience, you can look at it from a different perspective, not what is wrong with me or why does it not work with me, but there's a part of me and how can I work with it. So in hindsight, I noticed that I have been working with archetypes all along, as we all do, but we are most of the time not conscious about it. However, when we learn about the archetypes, we can consciously tap into that energy and improve in our life in a way that is easier and empowering. So as promised in the beginning, I want to share a few examples on how the archetypes have showed up in my life before being aware of them, but even after. Artemis, the goddess of wildness, for example, was one that became very, very prominent in my life when I decided to end my previous relationship. She really helped me to reconnect to what it is that I really wanted. And it wasn't out of rebellion, but it was much more up until the point I often feared of fully expressing who I am out of fear of losing the relationship. And if you haven't watched the Artemis video yet, first of all, she's gonna be in the description box down below. But basically, she is about following your inner voice, staying true to what really matters to you and following your own path. So in that phase where Artemis became present, it was a lot about listening to myself, standing up for my opinion, and doing the things that other people didn't really understand. Another archetype that has always been very present in my life has actually been Persephone. And it's really her journey of transformation that has been present in my life over and over again. Like when moving out from home, it was like a huge transformational experience for me. The moment that I entered that relationship that I mentioned previous, but also when I decided to get out of it, or we decided to end it. So there's this energy of transformation, taking the pain and transforming it, becoming wiser from it, growing from it, has always been very, very dominant in my life. At certain times of my life, it was like super intense. There was a phase in my life, like 2 or 3 years, where I did 4 to 5 courses per year on self-development, and I mean like very intense courses. So she kind of was not overactive, but very, very dominant, and I really needed her strongly in that stage of my life. And she actually is still one of my favorite goddesses. I really love the empowerment that she represents. And if you haven't watched her video yet, I'm going to put hers in the description box down below as well, so you can get a better understanding on what she is about. Another god that has also been super dominant in my life ever since I was a child is actually Aries. Like the determination to go after what it is that you want. Getting up after failure, not being defeated by those failures is a core energy that has always been super present in my life. And not only has it helped me to get through tough times, where I was like, I refuse to live miserably because of the experience, where I was like, I don't know how to work through that experience, but I know that I will work through it. So Aries had always been the part that was like, I refuse to give up. I'm gonna put him in the description box down below as well if you haven't watched him yet. But Aries has never been necessarily one of my favorite gods, but the one that I have been most grateful for, because he really pushed me through. He was so strong inside of me, even though I wasn't aware of him, that he didn't allow me to give up. He was the one that I was able to go through some of my toughest time, knowing that there was a way out, even though everything was like indicating something else or the opposite. At the same time, is Aries also the one that I need to kind of keep an eye on, because I easily overwork myself. I'm like so determined, I'm like, I'm gonna do this, to the point where I kind of neglect my well-being. So after having become aware of the archetypes, I also realized that as helpful as Aries has been, he was also the one that kind of had a tendency to push me through to the point of burnout. And so now I can be like, okay, I can actively choose when and how do I tap into that energy of Aries, and when do I consciously decide to stop him and be like, you know what, I know we can keep going, but we decide not to because we really gotta take care of ourselves. And yes, I actually kind of talk to me like I'm talking to a different person, because I'm talking to different parts of myself, because of what I said in the beginning of being able to detach yourself from it. So the moment that I kind of talk to that part of myself, I can easily take control over it instead of being controlled by it. So when I say things like, you know what, I know we can keep going, but we just decide not to, it's easier for me to step out of that energy instead of being pulled away by it and keep going working another 3 hours and ending up feeling exhausted and I need 5 days to recover from it. I don't know, for myself it really works. So the first 3 examples that I gave you, Artemis, Persephone and Aries, those were all examples when I was not aware or familiar with the archetypes at that point, and they showed themselves unconsciously. I just saw it in my behavior and in my desires. For example, Aries being the one to push, and Persephone, my desire of not accepting things as they were and really diving into transformation. Or Artemis started to listen to my inner voice and what it really is that I wanted. So I just noticed the energy, but I wasn't really aware of what was happening. I want to give you one more example on how the archetypes started to show up once I became aware of them. And one of the goddesses definitely for me was Hestia. She is the goddess of introspection, even meditation is something that you can attribute to her, and nurturing your inner fire. I'm going to put her link down below as well if you want to watch it. The way it showed up for me, for example, like I knew that I never was really good at taking care of myself. I was always about the doing part and never much about the being part. But becoming aware of the archetypes made me realize, first of all, the importance of that part of myself, but also how if I nurture that part of myself, it would positively influence the other parts of me. As I mentioned before, Aries would often push me to the point of burnout. Now that I'm aware of that, and I know that Hestia exists as a part of myself, but it's just very underdeveloped basically, I can start to nurture her and I can equal out the disbalance that I'm currently having. So she's the one that I'm going to focus on next very consciously and very intentionally, and also with the knowledge that she doesn't come easy to me. She's someone that I have to work on. Unlike Aries, where it's all about keeping him in check, but the energy is already very strong. What is also really interesting, and I'm not sure if you were able to notice it, but the archetypes show themselves in a different way. For example, for me, Artemis showed herself in a longing that I couldn't describe, but I couldn't ignore it either. Aries for me was like that, I'm not giving up, I'm gonna push through. It was like this very fierce energy. Hestia, on the other hand, was someone that started to show up as a gentle whisper. She was like, you know what, there's something else that you gotta look at. But she was very gentle and very kind, and so it wasn't a very forceful energy, and probably also the reason that I never really noticed her, because she was so soft. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind, even though the archetypes or the energy that they represent is essentially the same, one has to do with stepping up, the other one has to do with grounding, the other one has to do with transformation, like the energy will always remain the same. How they show up might be different for every single person. To sum it up, the archetypes really helped me to understand the why behind my actions, my choices, but even my struggles. To then accept them and start working with them to create a more fulfilling life for myself. They have shown me that there's nothing wrong with me. There are just different parts of myself with different strengths, different weaknesses, and different approaches that I need to take if I want to change something about it. So let me know what you think of this video. I would love to know what your takeaway was from it. Please let me know in the comments down below. As mentioned, the other videos are in the description box as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you in the next one.